Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel for this Saturday morning, afternoon or evening across the world we may be at. I hope your weekend is treating you well. I hope your weekend is relaxing and you're having fun with friends, family, loved ones, wherever you may be, or if you're at work with your work colleagues. And today I'm going to be talking about Matt Willis and Professor Green, and Matt Willis's podcast called On the Mend, where he had Professor Green on talking about his ADHD and autism diagnosis. And as a autistic neurodiverse woman, I thought I would talk through what was discussed on the podcast and then give my autistic thoughts towards the end. So I just watched this podcast. It's 39 minutes and 16 seconds long, and Professor Green his real name is Stephen, identifies himself as Stephen in the podcast, so I'm going to identify him as Stephen and also Professor Green because that's his musical name that he goes by in the music industry. He was diagnosed with autism at 40 years old, and Professor Green is a UK rap star, and he basically says that since receiving his autism diagnosis and ADHD diagnosis, it's a label that lets him be free within the recording studio. He's able to express how he feels with his lyrics and to tell his story through music. Stephen then goes on to tell Matt that he tells Matt's production company to look back but don't stare. That is so relatable right now, especially people who are neurodiverse like myself, who have been through the autism diagnosis and the autism after assessment period, where you think, oh, what now? Like, what am I going to do? To tell people to look back but don't stare, that means that you've come so far because you've gone through your past, you've gone through all your trauma things, you've gone through all things that you may have done wrong or said wrong now. But it's okay to look back at it, but don't stare at the person for going through what they went through. I totally relate with that. And then Stephen then got referred when he was having couples therapy. Obviously, him and his partner must have been having couples therapy for something that he didn't really mention on this episode, but I suppose they're having marital issues, I guess. And he said that the psychiatrist who he saw during couples therapy basically said that he needed to get checked out. And he then went and saw another psychiatrist who assessed him for autism and ADHD, and he got diagnosed with both. He describes himself as a work in progress. Again, I love that about him because he was open, he was raw, he was honest, he was authentic about what he was going through. And then he talked about going through shame shivers. And at first I kind of got a bit confused. I was like, what does he mean, shame shivers? Like, huh? What? And then when I listened to it again, I was like, oh, I get what he was coming from. So basically he means things that he wasn't proud of in his past, that he's done, that he's ashamed of or embarrassed of, and he calls them the shame shivers. And I totally relate to that because it's things like I've done wrong, things I've said wrong, and it kind of gives you the shiver. And yeah, so it's such a good name to call it, shame shivers. Like, I didn't really think about that. My brain didn't really click with it, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get what he was saying. Then when he was officially told that he was high functioning, he was later told it was ASD level 1. But for me that's really confusing because when I was diagnosed with autism, I was only diagnosed with high functioning autism. So is high functioning autism the same as ASD level 1, or is it two separate things? But when I have researched it, it does say that ASD level 1 is medium autism, medium functioning autism, aka high function, aka Asperger's, which also Asperger's doesn't no longer exist anymore within the DSM. So that kind of made me think a bit differently about him to begin with. Then he identifies regulating himself by humming, tapping and singing. So again, I regulate myself by twirling my hair, playing with my fingers. Sometimes I do a bit of singing here if I'm at home by myself. I may say things that I struggle with or say things out loud to help myself. And then he says the struggles of going through the assessment was with a relative who's able to give him some heartwarming, honest answers about himself, which I guess is good for me as well because I was able to have family members who have been in my life all the time. My auntie, my mum, my dad, my sister, and other people who knew that my behaviour wasn't right and I was acting different. I've always said things differently. I've always been very no filter. I've always been the kind of out there person. I've always been quite sociable, and but obviously I don't read social cues. I struggle to be in groups of people. I get quite highly anxious. I can get quite emotional sometimes as well. I'm quite an emotional based person. So again, I can relate to him when he says that he experienced going through periods of anxiety, depression, and the struggle with putting on being the social person. And then he talked about his past, about being in school and going to school, and the fact he felt forced to put on the everyday school uniform. Oh my god, I totally relate to that, because school uniforms are so itchy and they're scratchy, and the texture and the fabric and the colour and the material, and yeah, I can understand why he hated it and struggled with it and really didn't want to wear the school uniform every day going to school as a young boy. I can totally understand that as a young woman myself, who had to wear many different school uniforms through her years growing up. And so again, it can be a sensory overwhelm thing, it can be a physical overwhelm thing as well. And then he says his autism and ADHD, he had to stress this, and he made it clear for all autistic people like myself. Autism and ADHD are not an excuse for making things up or using it as an excuse for not doing things. It's about now and building the right people and the right support. 100% agree. 100% agree. Absolutely right. But the one thing I did disagree with him in this podcast was the fact that he called it an affliction. I hate that, because autism and ADHD is a neurodiverse gift. It's a different way of communicating, feeling, seeing, hearing the world around you. Like, when people say it's an affliction, it's a burden, it's a tragedy, it's chronic, it's an illness, like, no, what are you thinking? Why would you think that? Like, it's the most special way of being different, you know. We all think and feel and see the world differently. Just because you're neurodiverse doesn't mean it should be an affliction or a barrier. Not at all. So I did disagree with that section of the podcast as well. Then he talks about panicking about getting messages on his phone or opening mail because his brain and his body get overstimulated. 100% guarantee as well. I absolutely relate with this, because when you have letters come through your door and they have important, private, confidential, and then they start building up, and you think, oh no, I know I should open them. I know I should be functioning to look at them and read them and put them in order of date and severity, and your brain just goes into total panic. It's like, what am I meant to do with these letters? So again, I totally relate with what he was saying through not being able to open mail and sort it in priority and making sure that he's doing things in time of importance. And again, it can be the physical frustration, the mental frustration, it can be the organisation or lack of organisation in ADHD as well, and within autism as well. Then he says it's about being very analytical and challenging, accepting what you can or can't do. Again, I 100% guarantee and understand that, because once you learn what your triggers are within autism or ADHD, there's certain things you can do successfully and things that you can't do, but it does take quite a while to get to that trigger point and to physically and emotionally and mentally understand yourself for being different. So again, you have to do things time after time after time after time after time to make sure you know what you can do successfully and function wise before your brain goes, oh no, can't do that. Oh, your body starts feeling pain or stress or anxiety or a little bit of depression. Like, we have to find a suitable functioning point. We have to find a point where we can function successfully and actually do things that are good for us rather than being against us. So totally agree with that as well. Then he says that this world is not very productive or happy or healthy for us. Again, I 100% totally relate with that, because this world is built for neurotypical people, non-disabled people, and people like us who are neurodiverse or different. We find this world very challenging because it's the noise, it's the stimuli, it's the people, it's the colours, it's the lights, it's the smell, it's being touched, it's being banged into, it's people telling us to do things now and here and to sign this and to sign that and to stand there and to be there and to do this and to do that. And it's really, really frustrating because our brains simply can't take it. Our brains simply can't do it. So for us to function in this world is very, very challenging, and at the most times not productive, because we have to be in a place that hates us all the time. And then he does say that the rumours and the articles that have been released online recently about overdiagnosis, he says this is totally ridiculous, and that overdiagnosis doesn't happen, because let's face it, overdiagnosis is not happening. It's a fact that we're getting better at assessing autism and ADHD. We're getting better at observing people. We're getting better at identifying their behaviours, their traits, their symptoms, the way that they see the world, feel the world, and hear the world around them. It's not the fact that autism or ADHD has suddenly gone through the roof. It's the fact that there is better people there who are trained to identify it and to spot it and to help treat it and to help support the person going through the ADHD or autism process at the very beginning. And then he does say another very good thing, which I totally agree with. He says a lot of people back in the day, like him, like me, were very ignorant around autism, ADHD and mental health. We're very stigmatised about it. We judged people who had autism or ADHD. Oh, they're just spoiled brats, they're naughty, like they just don't act right, like, you know, they're a bit weird, like, you know. But we don't now, because we're getting better at spotting it. We're getting better at self-identifying it. A lot of people now on social media are self-identifying as being ADHD or autistic or both. Or HD, which means autistic and ADHD. So again, we are getting a little bit better at spotting it. And then he did talk about the fact that autism and ADHD needs to be separated mental health-wise. Absolutely, because autism and ADHD, I will stress this, autism and ADHD are not mental health conditions, and should not be put in the mental health criteria. And I don't understand why the UK government does this still. I don't understand why we are put in the mental health box, because we're not mentally ill. I don't understand why it's not being separated into its own diagnostic criteria box. I don't understand why we are still being put under the mental health route. I don't understand it. We are a neurodevelopmental condition. We're not mental health condition, so therefore we should be separate. I don't understand why that's not happening and why it can't be done. And then he mentions about executive functioning and protecting our energy. Again, protecting our energy and our executive functioning levels are very, 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 very important. Because when you're a autistic neurodiverse person or individual and you've got autism, ADHD or OCD or any of the spectrum conditions, our executive functioning is less to begin with. But our energy tank is less than what the neurotypical energy tank is. Our social battery is already nearly flat by the time we wake up in the morning, because we have to get washed, we have to brush our teeth, we have to get dressed, we have to have breakfast, we have to go outside, we have to do this, we have to do that, and our social tank is already at the point of being flatlined because we're already not coping. So again, we have to protect our energy and protect our executive functioning for what it is, and it can cause a lot of problems if we don't. And then the next thing that he talks about was that he listens to music to self-regulate and to self-soothe his emotions. That helps him to self-function. Again, I 100% totally relate with that, because as a autistic neurodiverse woman, I listen to a lot of music. Especially for me, it's worship music. Worship music seems to really chill me out and makes me feel less stressed. I write a lot of poetry to self-soothe myself, so a lot of my emotions are written down on bits of paper, and then I add words together to put it to sentences, and I put it into a poem, and then I usually either upload them or send them to people to express how I'm feeling, to let my emotions release in a safe and contextual context. Then he says that he identifies with being diagnosed late in life. Like Professor Green, I was lucky I wasn't diagnosed that late in life. I was only diagnosed at 25, he was diagnosed at 40, so I've had more time to self-adjust and to self-cope with being diagnosed with autism on the high-functioning side. And I think the struggle after is identifying who you are, why you are what you are, why you act like you act, and I think a lot of people don't understand it. And again, he does say that autism and ADHD need to be separated out of the mental health categories because we're not mentally ill. Then I decided to research what he meant by ASD level 1. ASD level 1 apparently is people who have the mildest form of autism with the minimal level of support. They are less visible, They are referred to as high functioning or Asperger's syndrome, especially women who fall under the radar on this label. They're not often noticed or diagnosed because we have coping strategies to successfully function, and we mask a lot better than the neurotypical or our male peers. Then he talks about masking. Masking autism or social camouflaging is the subconscious or conscious suppression of our autistic traits and behaviours to appear neurotypical in a way to navigate social pressures to avoid being seen as abnormal. And then he talks about executive functioning. Executive functioning refers to the cognitive processes, planning and organisation and focusing to make sure that we regulate in our own normal behaviours. So now I'm going to give you my own thoughts on this podcast. I will link the Spotify version and the YouTube version down below in the video description. So my thoughts is, I have so much respect for Professor Green, aka Stephen, and Matt Willis for being so open to doing this podcast about autism and ADHD. I think it's been able to explain the struggles of someone on the neurodiverse spectrum. I like the philosophy behind the podcast, the expressions, and like saying look back but don't stare. Like I've experienced that in my own life, being looked at like I'm weird and being stared at because I'm different. I do also agree that we are a work in progress. We're learning every day, we're changing every day in a world that constantly doesn't want us to be here, that constantly doesn't want us to be productive or happy. I'm constantly changing and learning as an autistic neurodiverse person. I think that the fact that he mentions about the high functioning label and level 1 autism label really did confuse me, but again I was able to think it through and find out for myself what it meant before jumping to conclusions. Then he said about suffering, anxiety and depression. Again, I totally relate to this as a autistic neurodiverse woman with anxiety disorder. So this made me feel really seen and heard. And then he mentioned about the overdiagnosis criteria and the online articles that are going around the internet. I totally relate and agree that it's not overdiagnosed. It's something that is getting better spotted and better treated and better looking after people with autism or ADHD, because there's a lot more medical professionals trained in the ability to diagnose and to do the assessments now. Also, I agree with him about getting the right support, the right people at the right time around you, because again, that support network is crucial. It's something that we should all be talking about and be supporting people who are going through the process or wondering if they are in fact autistic or ADHD or neurodiverse in general. The only thing I will say, again, I will speak up about this, when he called it an affliction, that really did make me sad, because autism and ADHD should not be seen as an affliction. It should be seen as something, as a gift, as a neurodiverse difference, as a blessing, something to be celebrated and be proud of. But again, I can see why he did talk about it like that, because the overstimulation, the confusion, the anxiety, the not understanding yourself, I totally get why he called it that, but again, I just disagree with him on that term. Then he talked about being productive and healthy and accepting difference, and you know, the fact that he's proud of who he is. Absolutely, I'm proud of who I am. I really am proud of who I am. I've done a lot in the area for Ipswich to campaign for autism and neurodiverse conditions. I think I've really got my voice out there. And yeah, the last thing I want to talk about is struggling with the words and language and the context in which words and language are used for someone who is neurodiverse. Please look out about the way that you use words and language around us, because we find it very, very confusing, and it can cause us to go into meltdowns, shutdowns, or socially withdraw from the conversation. But please like, comment, share and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.